Hi everyone, welcome back to a Very Queer Book Club. Today I'm super excited to be sitting down with Adam Sass to begin our month of talking about Surrender Your Sons. If you've not purchased your copy of Surrender Your Sons yet, you can do so by following the link in the description below to purchase it from Main Street Books in North Carolina. That is Adam's local indie, and we will be talking about that today. Just a warning, this interview and Surrender Your Sons does include content about conversion therapy camps, so just keep that in mind going forward with this interview and if you decide to read the book. And without any further ado, here is Adam Sass. Well, hi, Adam. Thank you so much for joining me. Will you first tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, well, my name is Adam Sass. My pronouns are he and him. And yeah, I got a debut novel coming out in September, Surrender Your Sons, which people watching this probably know already. Yeah, a little bit about myself is I'm a creative who has been all over the map. I grew up in the rural Illinois, went to Chicago, then to LA, then to New York, then back to LA. Now I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, where my family is, and I love it here. So, like you see, I'm living with my family right now because of COVID reasons, but in November I will have my own place.
I love it. I love it. And in North Carolina, because every month I'm having the author pick a bookstore to support. So I'm going to send everyone to Main Street Books to purchase their copy of Surrender Your Sons. So I want to know, why do you love them so much, and what is your relationship with Main Street Books?
Main Street Books was, when I got here at the end of May, North Carolina at that point had just exited phase 1, was in phase 2, a very hopeful phase 2. North Carolina's governor has been very great about listening to science and then going a little forward, but then, we went too far, got to close it down again. So he's been very good. But during that time, Main Street Books was opening to the public, but they were doing it because they're a smaller store, but they were doing it for appointment only. So very easy. You went on their website, you just had an appointment, and they would go in there. So you got basically like a personalized shopper experience, and it was really wonderful. It couldn't have been a better way to meet my local. So it was, when I went in there, like it was like I was in there for the 700th time. Like it was just so personal and warm, and it was one of those things where, and they were already like and they were just so in the know about everything. And as I kind of kept going in there, as news kind of kept breaking about She Who Must Not Be Named, like they were editing for that, so it was just very nice to see like a very conscious local bookstore, because they're still a small town bookstore, but like that doesn't necessarily mean what people might normally assume that means. There couldn't have been more wonderful, and even with the mask on, they recognized me every single time, so it was just great. And I was able to drop stuff off. I co-host I occasionally guest co-host a Slayer Fest 98 Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast, and one of the booksellers was such a fan, like an old school fan of Buffy. Like she heard that, it changed her world. So I think we got off on the right foot there.
Amazing. And so let's chat about Surrender Your Sons. So I mean, it's so good. It's so wonderful. Would you just let us know, I mean, first of all, for those who might not have read it yet, it just came out a few weeks ago. Tell us a little bit about what it's about, and then kind of the origins. Where did it come from?
Well, so Surrender Your Sons is a YA thriller that's set in a conversion therapy camp on a secluded island. I pitched it as a queer Lost, where it's a mystery island, and every chapter is a cliffhanger, and there's mystery, but it really is about it's an ensemble, but it's about this boy, Connor Major, who is taken to this camp on this island, and he basically pretty quickly rallies the other campers that he meets there to rebel against the camp and not just escape, but try to take them down, because turns out that they are sitting on some pretty nasty secrets, which could spell doom for them or for the campers. And so we follow their journey as they attempt this chess game against the camp.
Well, and one of the things I love most about it is I just recently read Boy Erased, and I'm like, oh, another conversion. And I was like, and then I had another friend who was like, let's read it together. And I was like, I was surprised at how much it didn't feel like a conversion therapy book. It was very much, it was nothing like I thought it was going to be. And why I was writing this specific story, I feel like it's a story about healing. It's a story about queer healing specifically. Why was that so important?
Well, thank you. So thank you for saying that, by the way. So this was something that was very important for me that, because first of all, this started as I wanted to write a revenge extravaganza, but for queer people. I think when I first started writing this book, years ago, Inglourious Basterds had just came out, and so I was like, I was so like into that movie, and I was like, I was thinking of ways that it could fit for a queer revenge story, and in a very basic version of it, it started off that way, where it was like, this would be a way to have like physical people to rebel against, because conversion therapy is something that's it's very insidious because it is pervasive. It is incredibly damaging. It is at the root of most of our problems as a community, whether people realize it or not. And this was something, so Garrett Conley, whose memoir, Boy Erased, you mentioned, we know each other, and I had spoken to him a lot during the writing of this. We had worked together on something for Boy Erased, and where I was interviewing conversion therapy survivors. And so it was something that was, while it was very important for me to write a queer adventure story on an island and embrace those aspects of loss that people loved, like cliffhangers, mysteries, lots of characters, spooky stuff, that it was still something that a conversion survivor could read and not feel completely like, this isn't my experience, or this is laughing at it or invalidating it in some way. So it was really important to get that juicy sort of middle, where it was, it was a propulsive fictionalized story that took a lot of things to extremes to really make people feel it. Because I've always said, like, if you want the realistic, like, this is what conversion therapy like is experience, like, go read Boy Erased, go read Miseducation of Cameron Post, Orpheus Girl. Like, there's a lot of really great conversion therapy stories about their nonfiction, fiction. But with this one, I wanted this to be, especially after the last few years we've all been through, I wanted a wish fulfillment story. I wanted something that was, because those stories are incredibly realistic. And because of that, you sort of have to hew to, for Garrett's story, his real life, what really happened. You're maybe not going to get this, like, the camp, gets taken down and the people get taken down and everybody goes to, jail, like whatever, like where it's, there's not an action movie satisfying sort of queer victory ending that I really wanted, because, you're honoring the truth of what really happened. And so I wanted to do something that honored that truth, but still at the end of the day was like, hey, I'm releasing a book at the end of 2020. What a traumatizing year this has been for everybody concerned. I want this to be a queer victory story. This is just the story that I wanted to see. So that was very important for me. So listening to survivor stories, and like you said, it's about conversion therapy, but it isn't, because something that Connor realizes throughout is that his conversion therapy didn't begin when he arrived on the island. He was already in it. The idea that conversion therapy is more than a facility. It is something that it is anybody, your family, a priest, a pastor, anybody who is attempting to coerce you or convince you to annihilate your queerness. That is conversion therapy. That's really what it is. And so that's why it's insidious, because it can disappear and reappear, and its effects and its power can be felt everywhere. It is so damaging. And that's why I say it's at the root of a lot of our issues, is because that denial of self, that's what that is. And that really is at the root of a lot of erasure and so many of our problems. So I wanted to do that, but bang.
Yeah, and it's so, what I love about this book and so many other, books that are coming out, especially this year, is that we're moving into a place where queer YA is not just coming out stories. Like, I think, I love those, of course. I think they're important to have their place, but I think it's so exciting to see stories being told that are more than just about oh, I'm sad and coming out. And so, especially this being a thriller, I don't think I've ever really, there's not really a whole lot in this space. So is this specifically a place that you, I mean, looking forward, want to write more in? Is because it's not really a space that we have a whole lot of queer rep.
Yes. So queer thrillers are enjoying a lot of great mojo right now. What kind of got, so I was in the middle of writing this when I read Caleb Brerig's Last Seen Leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, he's a pioneer. And so, so that really showed me like, oh, you can do a story that's, because that book, Last Seen Leaving, is it's about coming out, but not in the usual way, not in the way that, because I always say that like coming out stories is kind of like the queer fiction equivalent of like Bruce Wayne's parents being murdered or Peter Parker losing Uncle Ben. Like it's the story. It's like it's so important to the core of the character, but like, oh my God, we've seen it adapted. It's been seen.
For more than that.
More than that, yeah. So it's like, okay, well, how do you do, because coming out is such a part of, and coming out is a big part of Surrender Your Sons. However, what we're seeing is when we open the book, he's already come out, but it's fresh. And it's about that weird middle where the family isn't on board yet. But like they want to have, it's just this sort of strange netherworld that a lot of queer people spend most of their lives in. If they have a family that's weird about it or hostile about it. So I would love to write more in this space. Queer thrillers I would love to see them do more. I have different places I would love to take them. I'm working on another one right now. Can't talk too much about, but like it is, it's definitely something that I love because I love thrillers. I love like 80s, 90s thrillers. This is sort of like there's a lot of drama in Surrender Your Sons, but there's also a lot of like 1994's Speed. Like there's a lot of like thrillers that I love, like movies I'd rent on VHS or whatever, or DVD, that like are a big part of my creative love as well. And so sort of taking these important spaces, like you said, coming out and expanding it to be not just telling this one story. If you are telling that, tell it through a different way or mode, or in the very least, just we just need a lot more. Like that's the thing. Like the LGBTQIA and all media doesn't need less; it needs more. Like more coming out stories, but that not at the expense of other stories, other identities. Mm-hmm. More, yeah.
Always more. Well, and one thing I love, obviously this is a very scary, dangerous kind of summer camp, but one of the other people I'm interviewing this month is, so I actually in high school, every summer went to a queer Christian, like affirming summer camp on an island, set on an island. It was very like, so like I read this and I was like, this feels like the like entire antithesis to, so I'm interviewing actually one of the founders of that camp. He read the book as well. And so I wanted, do you have any like summer camp experience that you kind of drew on in this?
I did, and it was very positive. It was not queer, and it was not necessarily Christian. It had some Christian roots, but it was a place where I bloomed as a person, because I in the years since I've been there. So I went there from like 7th, 8th grade to like sophomore year of high school. So I was probably like the age of like the beginners in Surrender Your Sons, like some of the younger kids who were just sort of observing. Like that was a lot of my experience, is that like I was one of these beginners who was sort of like there, kind of observing these older kids and their interpersonal, they were having relationships and we were all like, ooh, what's going on there? They're like, ooh, tell us more. It's new to me. But like, it was a place where I felt challenged and nurtured and grown, and I grew as a person, and I opened up. And that is what happens to a lot of these kids in this book, just through a negative prism that they're forced to, versus, sort of a positive and uplifting. So there are elements of this camp that I went to in this, but they're loving little Easter eggs. It was called Camp White Eagle, so people who've read the book would know that Ario lives in a town called White Eagle, and we had in the breakfast chapter, they sing a Johnny Appleseed morning breakfast prayer, and that is verbatim what the with what we did there. So a lot of that was my emotions and little clues and Easter eggs there. But I can't believe you went to a island affirming queer camp. That's right.
Because I mean, in like middle school, I did go to like a Christian summer camp, and it wasn't like conversion, but like, and then I came out in my freshman year of high school, and my parents were like, okay, maybe we won't send you there anymore. Because I remember my last year at that camp, we did this they sent all the boys into a big field, and we did activities about how to be a man. And it was like building campfires, and like we played football, and I was like, I don't belong here. And all the girls had like a spa night. And I'm like, this is weird. And so I told my family that, and they're like, okay, well, you won't go there anymore. But so.
Great family. Yeah, this is, camps in general, even if they were affirming, were just very gendered.
Yes.
So there was a lot of, and that's something that I would love to have explored even more. But as we know, Surrender Your Sons is a long book, so I had to cut some stuff out. But there was definitely stuff in there about like, yeah, they have extremely gendered cabins and everything else. And yeah, it's one of those things where there was and one of the counselors in my book was inspired by someone who worked at this camp. This was like adjacent, like this camp like occasionally rented out to host other camps. Mm-hmm. So there was like a much more extreme religious camp that did come in when I was older, and I was like a sophomore, and I was on more of the counselor side. Mm-hmm. And there was so many little things I picked up that did end up in the story, or at least coloring the backstory for some of these counselors. I remember specifically, this will tell you when this was, I think it was like 99. So it was Christina Aguilera's first album had just come out.
Which that's the time where we know that
the flavor of that time. Yeah. So it was Genie in a Bottle was the big single. And I remember one of the kids, the younger kids, playing it or singing it or humming it. This counselor guy lit into this kid about Genie in a Bottle and was like saying it was prostitution, saying it was witchcraft. And we were like, well, which is it? Like, so we were...
Pick a side, which one?
And he went in on it, and I was like, dude, like, so that's why a lot of Surrender Your Sons, like a lot of these things, like, I think the misperception about conversion therapy is that it's like electroshock and these things that sound dramatic, but are actually, electroshock has its, has its place in actual, healing. But there's really not electroshock in conversion therapy right now. There might be in some of these versions, but that's why there isn't any in Surrender Your Sons, is that it was all verbal, it was all emotional. And I really wanted to show with this book, I wanted to draw a very clear line, an immediate line between emotional abuse and manipulation and physical violence. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think like, well, it's emotional, it's this, I wanted to show immediately how quickly that can escalate. And it does escalate in this. And so that's why in Surrender Your Sons, a lot of my Christina story, it's, there are little throwaway moments that seem at first like, oh, haha, you're really going in on this Genie in a Bottle song. It's, who cares? It's a song. But those added up in the suffocating, claustrophobic environment of this camp, especially when the high stakes of a vulnerable young queer kid who isn't out, having this spoken to you, like it makes you question everything down to a song that could make you happy even for a moment.
Right.
And to show how much that will just like completely allow them into your brain and allow them into all your choices, everything down to even a song.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about it briefly just a little bit ago, but I love the balance that you found between like the scary dark moments and the joy and healing that kind of happens in it. I would love to know a little bit how you went about finding that. You towed the line really, really beautifully. A line that you could have easily it could have become something very different and not good.
Thank you.
So how did you find that balance?
That balance was hard to do because I knew at first, And then as my team grew, we all knew it. We knew that this was important. As I got an agent, Eric Smith, and as I got with Flux, my publisher, we all knew that like when it was right, it's great. If we messed up even a little bit, it could be disastrous, because we never wanted to laugh or make a joke to diffuse the tension of a traumatic moment. It always had to be in service of a character who was using this to compartmentalize what they had just gone through. So that's something that, like, as queer people, a lot of queer people use humor as a way to cope. We're not judging it, and I use it myself, and many people do, and it's kind of what defines our community a little bit. So that's why it was important to, and it was fairly easy to get right because I live it. Like, I was like, great. I didn't, it was like, well, I kind of know when it was, you kind of use my internal compass of like, well, during this extreme moment, we can't really, or if there's it had to be acknowledged in some way. So it was something where, like, I feel like having something that was wall to wall grim, wouldn't feel correct, because even though it is grim, resilient queer kids in this, and I mean pretty much, and I mean like every queer kid is resilient who goes through this. So I wanted it to be like they know intimately how to compartmentalize this, so it just wouldn't feel correct if they weren't dealing with it in some way. I mean, you look at any TikTok during this pandemic, and it's like it's all jokes about the worst stuff happening to us. So
laughing through the pain.
Exactly. So it's all like, okay, this is happening. So that was that. It wouldn't feel correct. And then, it would be a pretty brutal read, on top of a read that's already difficult. It's, it is about trauma, but I think it was important for me to just go, okay, well, I'm telling a story about conversion therapy, so I can't tell that story without talking about trauma and my point of view on trauma, and how you heal from it and how you don't heal from it. And I think that does give a lot of authenticity. That was my intention to the read, where it's like, well, through trauma, it's a stop and go with how you feel about it day to day.
Well, and another one, and I don't even know so much if there's a question in this, but one of the other themes that I love that you explored is the idea, and I don't want to go too much into it because I don't want to spoil it, but the idea of letting go of things that you think you want so badly, but at the end of the day is not what you need. And I don't want to, I'm talking about a very specific moment, but I don't want to, yes. I hope you know what I'm trying to talk about.
I do. Really there's, so, without spoiling it, this is the ending you're talking about. Yeah. So so we're talking about the ending, and the ending, I have teased quite a lot on Twitter and Instagram that it's, the ending is controversial, and like it's we will say no more, but like it's a shocker. You're not safe in this book, even in the epilogue. Like, so it's a thing. So I mean, with this is and all of this book is about I really wanted it to be, even for kids who are not queer, or even for kids who are queer but not going through something this extreme. It's really good to know. It's always good to know your worth, and it's always good to know your boundaries, what you can live with, what you can, because for me, that's what life is. Life is you are constantly in conversation with yourself about what you will put up with and what you will not put up with, what you will tolerate, what you won't, what you will let in, and then you can change your mind. There's a lot of negotiations constantly, and I didn't want to write something where like that said like, oh, teens don't have giant decisions like that to make, because many do. So this was something where the main characters who are kind of confronted with these choices near the ending, it really is about what can be forgiven, what can't be. And I don't really, a lot of stories of hope um, take, and I do believe Surrender Your Sons is a story of hope. A lot of stories of hope tend to go towards always forgive. I do not. So, and I think you'll see that in this, and that can make for a harsher read. But I think it's definitely part of the conversation nationally and planetarily we are having right now, which is we're dealing with an administration and with voters who we're seeing that they are capable of depths we have not even imagined, or a lot of us haven't imagined. Some people have been imagining this for a very, very long time, and some of us are just finding out about this right now, to our chagrin. So I think it's just a matter of, okay, well, how do we move forward in a way that's best for us? And what do we forgive? What do we not forgive? That's a very personal question. And so hopefully Surrender Your Sons leaves readers with tools that will help them make those choices for themselves. And they understand that, like me, Adam Sass, the author, does not say in Surrender Your Sons, this is the way to do it. I pose many more questions than I answer in this. And so they're really more, it's perfect for a book club, because it's ask questions and what do you think? What would you do in this situation? That's what I kind of wanted this to be. I'm a David Lynch fanatic, so this is kind of this is who I studied with, basically. And this is, and that's all questions. She loathes giving you answers because it's just one person. So this is something where it's like, this helps you make the decision that's best for you. And it shows you, well, this is what this character would have done. And that's the good thing with an ensemble cast, is that I'm able to show, not just have like many more types of identities so that more readers could potentially see themselves in different characters. And I have readers of different identities who see themselves in different IDs of it's been wonderful to like see reader responses to this. So I think just having more, like my more not less philosophy, more queer characters allows for a richer breadth of lived experience, so that people can pick their favorites. It's not just here's your one queer person that you're following and hope their responses are your responses. We have queer characters who are way more sensitive, who are way more hardcore, who have had it easier, who have had it harder, who have bigger arcs, who are correct from the get-go. And hopefully in that you can find yourself and see how maybe you would handle this sort of situation. If you do a Surrender Your Sons escape room, how would you handle this situation?
That would be scary. No.
That would be terrible.
No.
I wouldn't know.
I don't want it. I read it. That's enough for me.
Canceled.
Oh,
No, it's
maybe a nice movie, or I can like watch it and not be in it.
Ooh, a Netflix like choose your own ending kind of thing. You're like, okay, how would you react? Would you go get out of my face, or would you go sure? Yeah,
that would be cool. Well, and one thing I love as well is you for the past couple months you've been leading up to the release with this prequel. I would love to hear more about that. And do people need to read that beforehand to kind of understand? Where did that come from?
Well, first it came from a need of, I needed to put out a newsletter to let people know what was happening. And I wanted to make the newsletter a little more essential. And I'm like Mr. Tease. I like kind of putting out like clues, and it's a mystery. I wanted people who may not be familiar with me, because here's the thing, 2020 YA it's an embarrassment of riches. There are so many talented people dropping books, not just debuts, but people for the second, third, fourth, fifth time. I knew that there would be so many legit people to give like your money to, your time to right now, especially during COVID, where, money can be tight, time can be tight, mental bandwidth can be tight. So I was like, okay, well, I really wanted to say like, okay, well, I'll give people a taste of what my voice is like and the kind of story they're going to be able to tell. So I was like, if people read the prequel and they're like, okay, great, I vibe on this darkness, I vibe on this voice, I like the humor and the dark, you know, because it gets tough too. So, and if they knew that, they would know, well, maybe this is too tough for me, I'll skip Surrender Your Sons, or hopefully B, they would go, great, I'm in, I need to know more, and they'd already be kind of primed for the world. So I had this story too, because Evelyn Schreiber appears in a small way in Surrender Your Sons, and so I knew I had this story of a fun aunt who had a gay nephew who had vanished without a trace. And we see this nephew, spoiler, he's in the book, he's in the island. When we first hear about the island, Connor is actually running into a GoFundMe ad from this aunt. And that's our first hint that like something ominous, kind of what's happening, kind of creep in. I wanted it to be like one of those Netflix documentaries, like Unsolved Mysteries, where it was like, we don't know what happened to him. And I kind of had this thing of like, well, what is, like, from Evelyn's point of view, how frightening would that be to, the tagline for The Search for Drew Schreiber, the prequel, is, well, what would you do if someone you loved went missing, but nobody believed you? Thrillers have two plots. It's nobody believes me, and I can't trust anybody. So those are the two things.
You got both of them.
Yep. So you got both of them. But she's up against quite a monolith with this camp that's up to some very unsavory stuff. So I was like, well, there is still the storyline that I knew existed. And so that this was my way to parse that out. And so it's in 9 installments. I released it over once a month in real time. So the whole story of Surrender Your Sons takes place in July 2020, and it kind of built up to that. And the last installment, came out just before the book came out.
And so we had the prequel, we had talked a little bit at the end. I'd also love to talk, because it's gorgeous and I don't have my physical copy to hold up and show. Thank you. The cover. That cover is just out of this world. I love to talk about, the artist is amazing. Like all the credit to that artist.
Jake Nordby.
What were the inspirations? What went into it? What I also love about it, is it's the type of cover that I think a queer person who might not be out could pick up and still read the book and not be like, I'm out of the closet, and it's still gorgeous. Yes. And I think there's such a need for that these days. It's such a
I wanted Connor Major, the real kid, to be able to pick up this book and read it in his living room with his mom watching and her not realize. That's what I wanted. So, because and this is something that I talked with Phil Stamper a lot, author of Gravity of Us. It's a constant conversation, and there is no right answer. It's just what you want. And so Gravity of Us has another beautiful cover, all those colors, and it's two boys, holding hands, and it's glorious, and it's on a shirt. And get his merch, everybody. And it was, and we talked about it where, there is that conversation where you go, you're a queer kid in school or at home. Do you want people, if you read a book like this, are there holding hands on the cover, and what will that do to you? Because on page rep, on cover rep, and it's great and all that. So but I knew for this one, it's not really a romance story. There is relationships in it, and so that was a sort of an easier pick for me there, where it is a psychological thriller, not a romance, and so it was a lot easier to have this very spooky Rorschach test island as the cover. I wanted it to be a little queer agnostic on the cover. Once you look at the back, if you look closer at the fine print, it says like, this is a great queer story. But the thing with this cover is that I wanted it to just give people the creeps. Flux has been amazing, and they approached me. They said, do you have any ideas? And I just kind of said like, well, I just don't really want faces in it, and because faces are like a really, really big thing in YA right now, but I just felt that it wasn't correct for this. I also didn't want it to feel like, I really do want it to feel like there was an ensemble, that it's Connor Major's story, it's first person, but there's a dozen kids it could be about. I wanted people to be able to put themselves in the book as much as possible. And then beyond that, I, just basically said, make it creepy. Just have people I wanted it to communicate something really not good happens in here. Like, so, like, just when you look at them, when you're holding the book, you're like, something very scary and upsetting is going to happen in this book.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's October, it's spooky season. You've written a spooky book. What are some of your do you have any spooky traditions? Do you have a favorite Halloween costume? What are you doing? What are you doing for spooky season?
Oh my gosh, this is such a depressing, spooky year. Yes. But the whole year has been spooky. So I think all of our traditions are going out the door this year, but actually I haven't dressed up the last few years, to my tears, because I lived in LA and we lived in these places where it wasn't really like, I've had a few years where I've been kind of a homebody, and then now I'm with my family in North Carolina, and I got my nieces who are obviously all about Halloween right now, so they are definitely, I'm going to take them trick-or-treating, which means I'm going to need a costume, so not sure what I can do. Maybe I should dress up as one of the campers. I have my camper shirt. Yeah.
And I know the book is set in July 2020. So obviously in the height of our, COVID-ness is when this book is happening. So it's obviously but I want to know, this is a two-parter question. What are Connor and the gang doing now in quarantine? What are they up to?
Oh my gosh, in quarantine. So, without giving away the ending, because the ending takes place December 2020, so there's a gap. So without giving anything away, I will say, Connor is having absolutely probably the time of his life in quarantine, because as we see, he's very outgoing, but he is an introvert. So he's someone who's like extremely, extremely cool with being by himself. And so I think he's one of those folks who's like, great, I've got this time for this, and catching up on games. I think he's catching up on a lot of video games, because as we know, his mom took away his Switch when he came out, which is the worst thing.
Got to build up his village.
Exactly. He's catching up on Animal Crossing, and he's like texting all of his friends like, oh my god, this, like, it's the first thing, and they're all like, yeah, we talked about this earlier in the year, and he was like, well, I was kind of going through something.
I had some stuff going on.
Yeah, some stuff going on. So yeah, he's being that guy who's like, okay, now I'm catching up on this thing called Animal Crossing. Does anybody want to? And everyone's like, we did that already. And
that's so May.
It's very May.
And now I want to know. I mean, I loved this story you put on Twitter. I think it was like a month or two ago, about your family and you coming together to help you create your closet office, which we are getting it was such a beautiful, like, it was one of those like moments. I'm like, this is a beautiful quarantine story that I needed today. It was one of those, like, this was so lovely.
It needed to happen because I'm a very outspoken person. So if I feel something, I say it, which great 9 times out of 10. However, it can get...
we all had our quarantine moment.
Oh yes, I had a big quarantine little mini meltdown where, because I had been promoting a book is its own full-time job in addition to the writing of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing that. We had just moved. We were going through a whole bunch of like life changes. I had just lost my job. So it was just like a bunch of like things that were bad for the brain. And then on top of that, I'm writing my second book, and I had another cool writing assignment that I was also working on. There was like a whole bunch of like, it was great abundance, but with the sort of quarantine limited concentration ability, it had made me a little like I needed my focus, I needed my attention, I needed my focus back. And so I was feeling a certain type of way. I said it out loud to my husband and my parents, all of whom I'm living with right now still. We got 2 dogs too, so it's a full house. And so I made myself known. And then my dad took me outside and we barbecued a little bit. And then when I came inside, my mom and husband had set up this closet to be a little office space, because what had been happening is, like, my dogs barked if somebody came to the door. My parents are very active folks. We're all four active people in this house. So I was like clearly distractible already. And then so they made me this desk in here. Lots of jokes about, oh, I'm back in the closet now and it's a safe place. But I will say the closet is a safe space for you when you need it for a temporary reason. So that's why I'm like, great, it is. The closet is not great.
We're here for
but it is helpful for you when you need it.
Well, and you have this closet office now.
Yeah.
But I mean, outside of the closet office, what have you been doing? Obviously you've been writing a lot.
Yeah.
But during the quarantine, during all of this insanity mess, what have you found outside of, hopefully you found something outside of work, maybe with your husband, with your family, to find sanity, to find, happiness and joy? Is there any shows, anything you've been reading?
Well, it's the fall, so it's favorite time. So we went to my nieces and my husband and I and my mom. We all went to apple farms out here, and we did that. And can't really go to movies yet. So all my normal things have been sort of plucked away. But I take very long walks. In fact, I probably take 2 hour. I think they're about 2 to 2.5 hour walks. And I go, and they're not runs, but it gets me my steps. But my neighbors have all seen me, like, I saw you down by the thing. Like, they were like completely, yeah. My country neighbor, she was like, I can't believe you walked all the way there. My kids, I can't believe this and this and that. I used to walk to work when I was in LA, and people thought I was from another planet. Like, they were like, they did not understand. And I just liked it. Because I'm kind of like Connor. I'm outgoing, but I am an introvert really at heart, probably, where I'm able to kind of recharge by myself. And so, like, the walking, the getting out, the sun. That's the other thing. I love the heat. This closet is very hot right now. It is hot, hot, hot. But I don't mind. I would way prefer that than being cold. I just don't want to be cold ever. So, like, I'll go out in the heat and I'll sweat and it'd be gross. But, like, I love it. There's something about it that I prefer.
So thank you so much for sitting down to chat. This has been absolutely so wonderful. And I will put a link below for people to purchase their copy of Surrender Your Sons from Main Street Books. And I cannot wait to see what's next from you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, TBD on that. I'm definitely working. I'm definitely writing. So I hope to have more to share with you soon. That's basically it. But just watch this space.
Watch your space.
Watch all of this space.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Jacob. It's been my pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this week. Next week, I'm sitting down to chat with Ross Murray from GLAAD. He is also the co-founder of The Naming Project, which is the gay Christian summer camp that I attended for 4 years in high school. So I'm very, very excited about that. And until then, you can still purchase your copy of Surrender Your Sons from Main Street Books following the link in the description below. And I will talk to you guys next week.